Hey friends, Tim Easton here, checking in from Nashville, Tennessee, and you are watching Time to Connect.
Hey, Tim Easton, how you doing, man? Thanks for taking the time to connect.
Pretty good, John. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. I've been a fan of yours for a lot of years. I'm going to tell you about that here in a minute, but I know you're a busy man. You got a lot going on. Hallelujah, we're back to playing live music again, and I see you're playing out a lot, and that's great. How normal do things seem to you now after these weird 2 years? Have we gotten to some kind of normal in your opinion, in your experience?
Some kind of normal is a great title for somebody. I wouldn't know. I would say that I don't believe there's going to be some kind of normal again. Maybe a new kind of normal.
Yeah.
So I can tell that we're all kind of afraid to jinx it by saying it's behind us now.
Yeah.
You know, I can tell no one really wants to say like, oh, pandemic's over. So we just kind of are just grateful for every day, every gig we can play that works out okay. And after you've had a few gigs, which I have, that just went without a hitch and everything was fun and people were smiling and not stressed out. You know, that's the thing. If someone's stressed out, the gig's not that fun, you know, whether it's the band or the audience. So once you've had a couple of gigs, you're like, oh my gosh, I love doing this. And I just feel super grateful that I can just play one gig, you know? So I am trying not to get too ahead of myself and stay in the now. And I don't know if we'll ever return to normal because I don't know. It's really, that's all I can say. I'm not sure we're going to quite return to that normal, but let's just hope that the generations that are coming up younger than us can still have some fun with music and rock and roll.
Oh man, I think they will. It'll all evolve in one way or another. You know, I was going to say, rather than the AA line, or I'm not sure where the line comes from, one day at a time, maybe that is from AA. We can say one gig at a time at this point and just appreciate what we have each moment, right?
Yeah, certainly one song at a time if you're writing.
Bingo. And what kind of, one of the things I've discussed with some of my other guests is, as horrible as this 2 years have been, it's, you know, obviously we've lost a lot of great people, John Prine, for example. There have been some silver linings, you know,
Yes.
and I'm curious, how do you react to that? What kind of silver linings do you see?
I most certainly had some brilliant gold linings in regards to my relationship with my daughter. You know, like, I mean, I was a road dog and I love traveling and playing and stuff, but I'm a good dad. I'm there for her, and this modern technology makes it easier, but I did, you know, I was also gone a lot. So, you know, when I'm back and it's great and we hang out a lot. But the pandemic just kickstarted a whole new relationship of like hanging out and working on stuff together, working on music, art, hiking, fishing, outdoorsy stuff where we didn't have to think about the pandemic. So, you know, for me, again, it's one of those things you don't want to jinx it and say too much, but it was one of the most enjoyable experiences for me, being able to just connect a better, more solid relationship with my kiddo, you know?
Yeah, right on. How old is she?
She's 11.
Yeah, I've got an 11-year-old myself, and
Right.
I was talking to Graham Weber recently, and his daughter is, I don't know, 7, 8, somewhere in there, and he said the same thing, and I feel it, man. It was a great time. You know, hey, you know, this is what's on our plate. Go ahead and do what you can with it, and deepening those relationships was really fantastic. Hey, listen, man, a lot of journalists and music critics have described you, and people can find probably all kinds of things about you online. I have found a little bit online, even though we don't really know you. And yeah, that was fun about your recent record. But I'm curious, how do you describe yourself?
Well, it's I do like songs. I like the troubadour existence. I like that tradition. I love Woody Guthrie. I love that folk tradition, the American song folk tradition that came, of course, from many different places, Europe and Africa, combined together to make this thing. I mean, I feel just really lucky to be to have grown up in this country when I did, with you know, the amazing brothers and sisters I had with all their records. So I really am, I am of that Americana strain, you know, because my, you know, my, all those brothers and sisters and all those vinyl records, man. And I, you know, I love Bob Dylan, of course, you know, but he told me to go study Woody Guthrie, and, you know, Woody Guthrie pointed even farther back. So I'm a big hero. I'm a big proponent of the idea that you should study the heroes of your heroes. And if you do that, and everybody does that, eventually you're going to end up, you know, deep in the, into the song. So I know that was a long about way to describe it myself, but I guess I'm a student of, you know, you know, I like to think that I'm remaining teachable to the folk tradition. And so I'm a big fan of that. And yeah, I love rock and roll too. Of course, I love the Kinks and Johnny Cash and the Clash, you know, it's like, but I found my own path in there somewhere. Sometimes it's derivative, sometimes it's mine, you know, and I'm working on it, you know. Thank God for those that came before me so I can learn from them.
Yeah, we all stand on the shoulders of giants, that's for sure. But man, I don't know of anyone who could claim the title troubadour more than you. I mean, you're in Nashville now. I know you live in Alaska, have lived in Alaska a lot. You're from Ohio. You've lived in New York and Tokyo and LA. You toured Europe busking there. I mean, that I think pretty much qualifies you, my friend, as a troubadour. That's a good word for you, I think. And Rolling Stone. Yeah, say that again.
You trying to say I get around?
You get around, man. You get around. A little reference to the Rolling Stones. Speaking of that, Rolling Stone magazine, one quote from them, they said that you have a novelist sense of humanity, which leads me to want to ask you a question I've asked some of my other guests here, which is, what books have been influential on you? What did you read growing up? What authors are kind of touchstones for you? I mean, you called on Dylan and Woody Guthrie, and I'm guessing Leadbelly and others are in there, but how about authors of novelists and other kind of books? What comes to mind there?
Yeah, well, I had some good teachers, and on the other side of this camera is a wall of books, and I have a book addiction. Clearly, I'm having a problem with that. I'm like hoarding, trying to hoard books, as you know, that's just the way it is, right?
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah.
And you swear you'll never. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to get any more books. I got enough to read. And they just keep stacking up in every direction, in every room. You know. So I mean, all the classics, right? But I did dig deep into Steinway, which is not that big of a stretch from Woody Guthrie and such.
Steinbeck.
And then, I'm sorry, Steinbeck, and Steinway piano, Steinbeck the writer, and you know, I guess I was referring to Hemingway there when I said Steinway.
Yeah, there you go.
And that points out the good, the attention deficit that I can get too with books, you know. But I like lately really been into the Latin American writers, Borges and Roberto Bolaño. And Bolaño is a guy who's, I've read all of his books now, like Steinbeck and Hemingway. I think I'm still got a few of his I haven't read. But I started young into that, you know, and I had good teachers that were helping me start to, you know, shape some of that literary criticism and, you know, writing about this stuff. And then, you know, the poets came along, and I went through the beats just like everybody else, and they pointed me backwards in time to those that came before, you know. And so I love, I kind of like dig into all of it. Right now I am, I like, you know, you got to think of it in terms of now. It's like right now I'm on a Murakami short story collection. Elephant Vanishes. You know, I'm just like I'm digging into some Murakami right now. So I mean, right there, I have to say I've just named a bunch of men And it's like, yeah, there is, you know, I'm like, well, there's Flannery O'Connor. I did read a lot of hers too. Eudora Welty, that might have come with the South. I visited Eudora Welty's house recently, actually.
Wow.
And yeah, in Jackson, Mississippi.
Hmm.
So, you know, all of it really. I mean, I haven't read all of it, but I am bookish in that way. And
Yeah.
that's just another description for me. I'm going to get into some stuff tonight. It might be nonfiction, because I'm reading Mary Carr, you know, Mary Carr, the poet, the American poet. She's also a big proponent of the biography, the memoir, you know,
Mm.
and she's got a book about writing memoirs. And I'm like kind of skimming through her book a little bit too, because thinking about my life, I'm constantly writing and
Hmm.
shaping it what it'd be. And I applied to go back to get my Master of Fine Arts in poetry, because there's not enough work for me to do, I guess. Do some more work. And I got accepted, but I did postpone it a year. I deferred it for a year because my dad's 96, and it was too much on my plate all of a sudden to think about also going back to grad school.
Yeah. Wow. Well, good for you that your dad's still alive at 96, man. That's
Yeah, pretty
that's
impressive.
very fortunate. Yeah.
Yeah, I was hanging out with him in Georgia last week, playing him songs and stuff.
Cool. You mentioned Latin American writers and poetry. Have you read any Octavio Paz by any chance?
I have.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have his poetry collection. Yeah. Yeah, you know.
Right here, I have a poster from the Elizabeth Bishop Literary Conference in Key West. It would have been about 1992, I think. And I just lucked into this. I sat down and had dinner and drinks with Octavio Paz and just 2 other people.
Wow.
Pretty phenomenal, man, to sit down with a Nobel Prize winner in a
Yeah.
setting like that. It was pretty amazing. Big fan of hers, by the way, Elizabeth Bishop. And
Yeah, she wrote the fish. She wrote the poem about the fish with all the yeah.
She was going to be the topic of my PhD dissertation when I was languishing in that, and it never happened. I also got very much so 20th century American poetry was where it was at for me in my literary studies. But I also got big time into nature writing, which I suspect you are a fan of as well, being a guy who's so involved in Alaska and whatnot. Let me recommend something that one of my other guests recommended that is fabulous. There's a nonfiction thing out now called A Stranger in the Woods. Do you know about this one? It's the true story of the North Pond Hermit, a guy who lived he was a hermit in Maine for 27 years. He had one encounter with a human being in 27 years.
Oh my gosh.
It's just fabulous. It's fabulous.
I love it.
Yeah, right on.
It's right up my, I mean, I of course read Thoreau and
yeah.
You know, we skipped over the Russians too. I got into the Russians pretty good. Gogol and Dostoevsky, especially. But this description of this hermit, like I'm already like, oh my gosh, like, yeah. I mean, when someone actually goes and does it, you know, and exists that way, I'm definitely interested in that. Yeah.
Pretty compelling. I'll actually send you. I'll email the book title to you.
Stranger in the Woods.
Yeah, I think that's what it's called. Now I can't remember who it was, but one of my other guests, I think it was Jamie Harris, was talking about more young songwriters should read more. You know, they all want to. I need to get an agent. I'm writing my songs. I'm listening to Towns and Guy and immersing myself. But she was saying, you know, you need to read more, which I think is fabulous advice for young people.
Yeah, man. I've had a couple of co-writing attempts with some hotshot guitar players, whatever, and I'm like, hey man, what are you reading? And they're like, oh, I don't really read books. I'm like, yeah, you're gonna need to bring the words in if you want to bring them out. I just tell people it's easier to write if you know, it's easier to spit words out if you've got more words coming in. And I guarantee you, any successful songwriter that we know, contemporary or the past, is pretty voracious reader. I know a few of them myself, and they read more than I do. You know, they don't talk about it; they're just reading. You know.
Do you ever write songs based on stories or on novels, either consciously or unconsciously?
There's been a few things. I borrowed so directly from the Kentucky writer Chris Offutt. He wrote a short story collection called Kentucky Straight. He's been a writer on the script for that vampire show Blood Simple or something like it, New Orleans vampire thing.
Okay.
He's got a couple of novels, and I use titles, some of his titles, Everywhere is Somewhere. It's like an old Kentucky expression, everywhere is somewhere. I use that for a title. So have I ever tried to sum up a book or a novel in a song? Not really, but I've tried to have a whole song be a book or a film or a novel, you know?
Yeah.
Specifically Rewind and stuff like that. You know, I always found it fascinating that Dylan said, you know, once he wrote Rolling Stone, he's like, oh, now I don't need to write that novel, or I don't need to make that film. I just cashed it out in a couple of minutes of a song.
Yeah.
And, you know, definitely that guy broke some barriers and opened up some doors for so many. And I'm excited about his writing book that's coming out. He's got a songwriting book coming out. I imagine he's gonna point the way towards studying the heroes of your heroes too.
Yep.
But the reason it's fresh in my mind is not just because I can see that poster of him playing the bass behind you, but it's because I went and saw him last week in Montgomery, Alabama. And at 80 years old, man, he just crushed that room hard.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's anybody, it's like seeing a late period Picasso at work. Like, you don't quite understand it. You can't quite understand what's going on, but it's fascinating. Yeah. Maybe you're almost in mockery of it at certain points because you don't understand it.
Yeah.
And then like 20 years later, you'd be like, oh man, that was like really powerful stuff, you know? And because you look at Picasso's like late paintings, it's just like breasts and women and like it's all semi erotic stuff, you know, or hyper erotic stuff. And it's just like, wow, that guy was just cutting loose. And now it's like, you know, it's on the walls of the Guggenheim.
Right. And I believe it was in Barcelona. I went to a Picasso museum that had a lot of his works when he was a child. Holy crap, man. Just a lot more realistic stuff, just amazing stuff. And, you know, to younger people who really don't get Dylan, and I understand that, you know, if you were 20 years old right now and you came to Dylan, it would be understandable that you wouldn't quite get it. You wouldn't have the context. But, you know, I want to just say, you know, go listen to Bringing It All Back Home and just imagine that something like this didn't exist before that. And look at Picasso's early works and understand that these are incredibly unique people. And I think you said it right. It's almost like you can't put your finger on what it is about Dylan. He's so powerful, so important, so unique that it's almost hard to talk about.
There's really no equal in the music world. Maybe Paul McCartney still puts out albums, still does a new song here and there, still going on tour. But Dylan's like out there not resting on jack shit for laurels. He's playing the new album, the whole new album, and a couple of oldies, and he's got 500 songs, and many of them are hit. You know, there's no resting. He's not doing the Elton John thing, and he never did do that. He never did what people wanted him to do. I mean, so it's just kind of it's just a remarkable art making process where you're like, and he, by the way, his paintings are amazing lately. It's
yes, they are. They are.
Yeah.
So in your songwriting, I'm just curious how compelled are you to tell a story, or to at least have some sort of understandable narrative going on? Do you ever sort of just paint with words and say, I don't know what the hell it means myself, but I just think it evokes emotion or whatever? What's your approach to that? How compelled are you to tell an understandable story?
I used to be a lot more compelled, you know. Now it's kind of a combination.
Yeah.
It's like I'll use a basic exercise. I'll open up a book and just grab a word if I'm stuck.
I do the same thing, or a phrase, right? Just a phrase.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
go from there.
If you grab two words in a row, you're bordering on outright pilfering. Not that I haven't done that, but
not that Dylan didn't do it right and left.
Yeah, I mean, he you know, I mean, it's really fascinating because Guthrie, not an original melody, you know,
right?
1,000 songs or more lyrics. Not one was an original melody. He just used old melodies and wrote his own words. that was the folk tradition was thus
Yeah,
laid down.
that was normal. Yeah.
Yeah, and then Dylan did it a few times. There's a couple of songs like the bells of whatever, I forget, just a couple older ones where he did take the
Blowing in
melody.
the wind is
Yeah,
an example of that.
that
Yeah.
one. Couple of them. He borrowed melodies from old British folk songs that he went over there. But you know what? He was studying. He was looking around. He was studying, and I can't point fingers at. Yeah, it's amazing.
No, yeah.
But the idea that I would tell a complete story, it doesn't quite matter as much to me. I mean, it is weird though when you have like, oh, those words kind of sound good together, but I don't know what they mean. I mean, it is good to have. I believe it's important to have some intention, but there are many stream of consciousness songs out there that are just like, oh, I'm not going to tell you what it means. It means whatever you want it to mean, man. I mean that, and in the end, then you have "I Am the Walrus," which just is like LSD spitballing by John Lennon. Doesn't mean a damn thing. Sounds good though, and certainly the production is cool as hell. And Dylan also has some of that too, but I prefer those Dylan songs that are like, oh man, his heart is broken or he's in love.
Yeah.
Like I prefer a story, but hey man, I just like when I finish a song, period, I'm just like on my knees in gratitude. I'm like, wow, I finished another song. So however way we can get there, man. If you have to force a verse and borrow a bit from the greats, and there you go.
I'm curious, and I want to ask you who besides Dylan maybe inspired you to actually write. But before you list some people, let me just tell you, for what it's worth, that your record "Break Your Mother's Heart" in 2003 was really big for me, man. I that's when I first heard about you and knew about you, and I had played in a few bands and done a little bit, but and maybe written 4 or 5 songs that I would sheepishly share with someone, but I didn't really think of myself as someone who, even though I was, a professor and was an academic guy and considered myself a writer, but I don't know what it was about that record, but man, I wore that CD. It was a CD then. I wore that thing out, man, and it just really touched me. And I just got to tell you, part of it was the timing of that, but pretty much right at that time when I was listening to that record a lot, I started writing a lot of songs. And so thank you.
Oh, cool, man.
It's a great record. It's a great record.
Thank you so much. I don't mean to be all fanboy on Bob or whoever, because I like to think that I do have my own path, but I have to be really honest about this. Like, so I'm young, like my mom played Dylan for me. Interestingly enough, was my mom. And I hear "With God on Our Side," and I'm like, whoa, that's like a movie. It's like it tells all this history and all this stuff. When you're in the 4th grade, you hear that between 2 big, speakers, analog, you're just like, holy shit, so but then no Dylan at all for me. And then in the Beatles and the Stones. Then I'm interested. Then I'm like, okay, the girls are going for that. Let's get materialistic here. And then I'm like into rock and roll and the Kinks and all that. And then I kind of leave folk music behind until I get to college. And then I still don't get into Dylan. I go kind of back into Hank Williams. Then I hear Hank Williams for the first time. I'm like, oh my God, how come I know all the words to this song after hearing it one time? Like, what's up with that? Like, it's a perfect country haiku or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
So then I start getting, into Sonny Terry, Brownie McGee, and folk music like this stuff, and Woody Guthrie and such. And Blind Lemon Jefferson and Lightning Hopkins and then Townes Van Zandt. And there's some stories going on. There's a Townes that definitely figures in there pretty strongly for me. But I stay away from Dylan because I'm superstitious of him or something. I'm like, oh, he's just, he's the Joker man. Whatever. I just keep him at a distance. And then you just can't escape it. You can't escape the, what do you call that? The consummate, when you're just working a ton, you're super prolific, and you just can't escape that. And you eventually like, wow, this guy didn't let the bullshit of this world and the business world, the music business, stop him from doing anything and following his own path. Neil Young, same thing could be said for Neil Young. And so these guys become heroes. and then the music that they love, you go find out about it more. And remember when Bob had that show, that radio show, and he's playing all those cool old tracks, kind of like Tom Petty's Buried Treasure show on Sirius XM. It's so cool, man. You're like, like I never listened to Jimmy Reed that much. I just didn't, you know. And then finally I was like, oh, I better dig into this guy.
Yeah.
So I can't even remember what the question was, but it's like I named a bunch of guys, but like, I mean, if you want to be a songwriter, you got to do all your homework. It shows pretty quick if you don't, you know. It's like you can just tell if the oldest record you had was by Nirvana or something like that. You know, you gotta you gotta go back. Yeah, you gotta go back. But for sure, the Beatles right off the bat, like those, I didn't understand. Like Paul, and he knew a bunch about songs, and John was writing about personal stuff. Like that combo definitely shaped me early on, like before I really got into Dylan. So
right on. There's an Audible exclusive that Steve Earle does, and the title of it is something like "The Moment in 1965 when." I fumble on this every time, but the point of it is when rock and roll became literature or became art. And he said it's when Bob Dylan wanted to be John Lennon and he went electric. And at the same moment, Lennon wanted to be Bob Dylan and he went acoustic. You called Townes Van Zant's name, and I encourage anyone who's interested in this to go look up. I think it's on YouTube. You telling the story of when you met Townes. It's pretty powerful. I'm curious, did you ever play with John Prine?
You know, I never played a song with him. I met him a couple of times, including one time a long time ago when I was a street musician. I went and found him in Ireland, and he was such a gentleman. And you know, I didn't name him. It's almost like his name is almost like ubiquitous now for like just to be a good human being. You know, it's not just about songwriters. It's like, what a cool dude, you know, just what a, you know, it's like one of those guys where you're like, whoa. I mean, you can just learn a little bit about humanity from that guy, his sense of humor. And the last two things I saw Prine do, I'd like to mention now because they were so powerful. So lucky to go. I attended this thing where and it's on YouTube. Bill Murray, Peter Cooper from the Tennessean, Bill Murray, and John Prine sat and talked for an hour, and I was in the front row for that. And you can watch that on YouTube. It's pretty cool. Bill Murray and John Prine talking about old Chicago stories. And then the very last thing I saw John Prine do was on 420. He came out as Todd Snyder's special guest at the end of the night and did Illegal Smile at the Ryman. And so, you know, just, you know, when you see that guy, you didn't feel nervous or overwhelmed, even though you're like in huge admiration of him. You're like, oh, it's my buddy. I can talk to him, you know, and it really, that is another, like, let's face it, most of us might geek out a little bit around Dylan, even if you're trying not to. The harder you tried, you know. I remember like running into Lyle Lovett or something, and him just like being like, you know, you don't have to pretend to be cool, just like be yourself. You know, I'm like, I'm trying.
I'm trying.
But people, when you meet a writer, it's like Gillian Welch, another songwriter that, I mean, I'll see her down at the turnip truck, you know, at the croak, whatever, at the store, and I'm like, oh man, there's Gillian Welch. Yep, I'm pretty fanboying out on her. I better just carry on down the produce section here. That's what it's like around here. So I mean, there's a few people that I have such reverence for, probably because they seem so approachable. And Prine is definitely one of those guys. And so I never got to pick a tune with him, but in a way I did, you know, because I was on that Cayamo cruise ship with him, and I went to see him 4 nights in a row, and I cried every time.
So one question I've been asking my guests that would be a good time to ask this, and usually I ask it with Bob Dylan. It could be Bob, or it could be John Prine coming back from the dead, whatever. One of those guys comes knocking on your door right now tonight and says, Tim, play me one of your songs. What song would you play for Bob or for John?
Well, I think that I would play my newest song, for them, you know? I think that's like where my brain is. Like the newest one that I don't have to look at the lyrics to, or I've got committed to memory.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what you do. Like, oh, your best song, or what you think's your best song, or what other people think's your best song is, it's not now, you know, it's not this time. So I think my immediate reaction is like, I'll play you a brand new one, you know?
Yeah.
And that'd probably be the best route to go.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're really still living it. You still haven't really played it much.
Right. Right. Yeah. My friends kind of tease me about that. They say John's favorite song at any time is his most recent song he's written. And
oh, there you go. Yeah. I
and,
mean, I'm glad I went with my gut on that one. And I'm like, you know, I was like, you sure you don't want any coffee? Because I'm gonna play.
I would recommend Speed Limit would be a good song to play for Bob. But
oh yeah. Yeah, and I guess when I hear that, I try not to. I could Dylanize that thing so hard.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, yeah.
The thing about that's very Dylan-y to me is that it's got a lot of lyrics.
Yeah,
you know, I'm cramming in, and I cranked the coffee that morning. I mean, I know that song. I swear to God, I got to the studio at like 10:30 that morning, maybe 11. By noon, that thing was in the can, done.
Wow, yeah.
But we played it 3 times, and I didn't notice until a couple days later that it was like 5 times as fast as the demo. And I was really bummed at first.
It works though, man. It works.
Oh yeah, no, I signed on because the producer was like, don't listen to the demo anymore. This is the one. Yeah. I'm like, oh man, it's so fast. I'm hyperactive, and you know, but it's fine.
Yeah, it's great. Man, I don't want to keep you too much longer. And my intent on these things is to keep them under an hour, and I think we're coming up to fairly close to that.
Yeah.
I have a feeling we could go on for a lot longer, but I want to respect your time, and I'd love for you to play a song if you will. Before you do though, can I hit you with some super rapid fire questions? Just
sure.
Kind of one off, just out of curiosity, how you.
Let's do it.
Favorite show you've ever played?
Favorite show I've ever played. Woo! It would have to be when I opened up for Willie Nelson in Cleveland. That was a big one for me.
Favorite show you've ever been to, attended?
Favorite show I've ever been to. Man, I was really lucky. I got to see the Velvet Underground in Prague, the all original members. That's a big one. I've got a lot. There's a couple of Patti Smith shows that just blew my mind.
Mm.
Yeah.
If you've not read any of her
read them
books,
all.
Man, they're great.
Everyone.
So if you get 1 word or 2 words, secret sauce to a happy, fulfilled life.
Secret sauce to a happy, fulfilled life.
By the way, you just went off camera for some reason. There you are. Okay, you're back.
Secret sauce to a happy, fulfilled life.
1 or 2 words.
Gratitude, family.
Right on. What happens when we die?
Ooh, I have no idea, and I don't really care.
And you're okay with not knowing?
Yeah, today.
Yeah. All right, last question. When you are dead and gone, what do you hope people say about you?
He picked up my spirits.
Yeah.
One time.
Right on, man. Well, you picked up my spirits tonight.
Is that too egotistical?
Like, no, it's great. It's great, man. It's great. I've got a shitload of other questions, but maybe eventually down the road I can get you for round 2 of this and ask you those.
Yeah,
for now.
I love that you asked me. I love that you asked me, like, what do you want to talk about? I'm like, don't worry, we'll figure this out.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. By the way, Graham Weber told me that about you. He said, man, don't worry. You guys will have a great conversation. But do you mind playing a song for us to take us out? Yeah, man.
I was gonna play Speed Limit anyways.
Were you really? Right on.
Yeah, for your show, I was like, oh, I'll just wrap it up with Speed Limit because I don't have to think too much about that one. Perfect. It's kind of fresh on the brain.
That's great. Hold on.
I'll give it a little Dylan intro. This is the whole G chord when you go like this. Speed limit is 24 hours, any more than I go out of my mind. I'm not worried about tomorrow. Yesterday is just a waste of time. Destination is a big dead end. I'm moving when I'm standing still. I'm not trying to find myself. I don't need any more time to kill. Delusion only gives a few clues until you're living on the run from your life. When the pain of staying the same outweighs the strain of making changes. Stuck in the middle of a losing game, I was just about to hang my hat. Just because you get out of the rain doesn't mean you won't still get wet. Mama told me not to get stuck on a hill. Daddy said you got to be your own boss. Thirsty man drinks his fill the same after both wins and losses. Every time I go with my head, I just step all over my heart. When the pain of staying the same outweighs the strain of making changes. I don't need to run a marathon or spend all day in bed. The worst enemy I ever had is the one inside my head. If I ever get satisfied, I'm gonna rearrange all arrangements. When the pain of staying the same outweighs the strain of making changes. When the pain of staying the same outweighs the strain of making changes. Changes. There you go, speed limit.
Right on, man. A really great song. That's a nearly perfect song. You had to feel really good when you wrote that song.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bunch of things strung together. I do know that my daughter actually changed one of the lines. I was like something like, just because when you're walking the straightest line, something, and she was like, she said something about the weather and not getting wet. Just because you get out of the rain doesn't mean you won't still get wet or something. And so she definitely had an input there.
Right on.
So yeah, I'll play my demos. I'll have my demos on, and I'll play them in the car. And now I'm like playing them for her, and she'll say, "Well, this is what I would say." Things like this.
That's
Yeah,
great,
I mean,
man.
yeah, I mean, I'm really lucky to have involved her in this process.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah.
so lucky.
Hey, Tim, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate you, and
Appreciate it.
it's great talking to you. I was looking forward to this conversation, and I really enjoyed it, and I hope to see you again down the road, man.
Thanks, man. Thanks all fans of songwriting and poetry and whatnot. And you can find me on the Patreon really easy. That's how I've been getting by during this time and all times. And I really appreciate you having me by to talk about songs. I love it.
Right on. And I'll put I'll put link on the show notes for this so people can follow those. And take care, brother.
Cool, man. We'll see you.
Bye-bye.